Alrighty, good morning. Thanks for joining us. Let's cover a few housekeeping items before the start of this webinar here. Regarding Q&A, if you have questions, feel free to click on the chat button to submit those. You can choose to submit your questions directly to the host, myself, or to the general audience. If your question's not answered during the call, we'll follow up with an email. For audio, adjust the volume by using the audio settings button or use your device settings. And finally, this webinar will be recorded. Please take a moment to turn off your video. If you do not consent to being recorded, please exit this session at this time. Okay, and without further ado, welcome to today's webinar. Today we'll be talking about how to use map layers on AcreValue. My name is Jeff Nizuka. I'm the lead account executive here, and I'm excited to be talking to you today about an overview as well as a little bit more details and depth on the different map layers that are available for you on AcreValue, as well as the best practices for how to use them. Specifically, let's jump into an outline here. We'll be covering, to start with, what are the map layers? What's regional, what's local in terms of the information breadth, and how can I access these different types of information around power generation, potentially property development and recreation. Next, after we cover the map layers themselves, we'll talk about the key uses and industries for each map layer and how they can be combined with each other, and go through a few professional and recreational use examples. Finally, we will combine the map layers with other AcreValue tools and go through some examples to help find and research potential properties that may be of interest to you, or potentially expedite some outreach process as well. So without further ado, let's flip into the live demonstration. And we're going to start our demonstration off here today on the AcreValue map page. This is acrevalue.com/map. You can also visit it from the home screen. And on the left-hand side here, we have our map layers toolbar. So this is the toolbar that shows us all of the different types of data available to us. And in the map layers toolbar, everything is categorized in a few different ways. Number one, the data sets are categorized by what subscription level you need to have in order to access them, as well as the general types of data that is available to you. If you don't see this map layers sidebar, feel free to use the map layers button that's on the map here, right here, in order to click it to then open the map layers sidebar. So let's go from the top here. We'll talk about the different data layers that are available to you, starting with if you have either a premium or an enterprise subscription. The first data set that will be available to you is the electrical grid. So if I turn this on, what we'll see within the electrical grid more specifically is the existence of electrical structures. So for example, I can show you a structure such as some of these gray areas on the screen here, the gray circular structures. Those are electrical structures generally considered or called substations. And these are areas where transmission lines and distribution lines, so power lines for electricity, are being converted or tapped into. And so as we zoom into a particular location here, we can see that there is a electrical generation station here in Illinois. And as I hover over this substation, I can select it and I see more information about the substation as well. What's the name of the substation? What's the type? How many lines are going through it? So how many electrical lines pass through the substation, as well as a maximum and minimum voltage range for that particular substation as well. Additionally, we do also have a few different types of substations on the map here as well. So you can see that we have what are called tap structures. These are areas where folks can tap into the power line without doing an actual conversion between voltage, which is generally what substations are used for. To turn some of these structures on or off, you can use the map layers sidebar And within a potential category, if there is a drop-down available, such as the electrical structures drop-down here, you can click on it to then filter by type further. If you wanted to turn on substations, tap structures, etc., you can click them on or off. For any particular map layer, you will also find an information bar here as well. That generally will provide more information if you don't quite know of what a data set is. In some cases, we will also have documentation and other deep dive kind of resources available for you so that you can click to learn more and read a little bit more about what our specialists are saying. So that takes care of the electrical structures. Let's talk about what structures do and what they tap into, specifically the transmission lines and distribution lines themselves. So we can see on the map here that we have quite a few transmission lines passing through the area. And we can see that as I select a transmission line, I can generally see the type of line it is, as well as the owner of the line. I can also see the voltage as well as the voltage class, which is a range of voltages that it could hold. We do also see a status, whether it's operating, and then we also see the different substations. So generally, electrical lines are connected from substation to substation. There needs to be a starting and an endpoint for them, and so in all cases, there will be a substation 1 and 2 designating kind of a start and an end to the line. Notice that we do also have distribution lines here as well. So distribution lines, fundamentally pretty similar to transmission lines. These are electrical lines that distribute electricity to end users, such as homes or businesses, commercial buildings, etc. Whereas transmission lines are generally the electrical lines that are a lot bigger, a lot higher voltage, and transfer power across wide areas so that they can be, the power can be moved and transferred. And so distribution lines, what that means is that they're generally going to be at lower voltages, something closer to what we would be able to use for our day-to-day consumption, rather than the transmission category being, again, that high voltage electricity traveling over long distances. And to round off the electrical grid information, we do also have information about electrified areas. These are end use areas, so designated a little bit more towards the distribution lines because the distribution lines are end use. And so these are areas that receive and utilize electricity from distribution lines. Now that we've covered the local characteristics for the electrical grid, let's talk a little bit more about maybe some regional information about the electricity and about utilities that are being operated in an area. So let's turn off the electrical grid information. And what we're going to do is move down to our next option here, electrical regions. So as I open this, we can go through to start with. Let's talk about electrical retail territories. This is information about what companies and what power utilities service particular areas to provide power to local customers, right? So the ability to retail and provide electricity to your end users, like you and me. The retail territories are marked on the map by white areas that you can see here. A little bit easier as I zoom out. And if I select on one of them, I can see more information about that territory, such as critically, who is the company who is operating that area? And then I can also tell how many customers are in that area. I do also have other information about interconnection areas and control, and I can see some information about total capacity and total electricity that's being provided by that company. Furthermore, for the territories themselves, generally the company providing retail electricity to end users will cover a large swath of area. And so in those cases where you selected an area that's also covered by a smaller municipal electricity provider, we'll oftentimes have information about that municipal provider as well. For this example, this is the city of Naperville, Illinois, that's providing electrical power to this particular area and region that we selected. We will also be able to talk about holding companies as well. And so these are other companies that will provide electrical power utilities, maybe not in the same way as the retail, but more so in a holding company structure. So as I select other areas, we can see that there are holding companies, namely speaking directly to the company itself, who operates it, and what is that company's information. In this area, you can see that the holding company's name is Exelon, or in another area, it is Ameren, Illinois, another large provider of power in the area. We next have electrical planning areas. So these are similar to and referenced on the retail territories card that we just took a look at. These are areas and regions that are governed, I guess you could say, by a particular region and territory operator network may be the best way to describe it. And so as we zoom out a little bit further, these planning areas tend to be grouped into larger swaths of regions in particular. And what we can see here as we select certain regions, there are transmission system operators that will cover a lot of the planning for a particular area and will operate in that particular area. So as you want to potentially operate a project or potentially add to the grid in a particular area, you'll be able to see who is planning what within these particular areas themselves. Next, we have NERC coordinators. So this is information about regions designated by the North American Electricity Reliability Corporation. And so these regions themselves, similar to the electric planning areas, will tell you who is the coordinator for a particular region. In this case, the one that we've selected is the Mid-Continent Independent System Operator, also known as MISO. There are several operators and territories across the US. Critical ones include the Mid-Continent, as well as there is Texas, so ERCOT, and then there's a few in the Southwest and California as well that are generally well referenced. We also have independent system operators. So these are independent and federally regulated entities that coordinate the electric generation and transmission. So as I zoom in here a little bit more, we'll see again, Mid-Continent Independent Transmission System Operator shows up. But if I select another particular region within, I can see that it is actually an area referenced by PJM, another region here. And finally, we get to the most well-known. So this is the FERC region. This is Federal Energy Regulatory Commission regions. So these are independent agencies that regulate transmission of electricity. These are oftentimes referenced by developers when it comes to who operates in what area. Again, very similar to your electrical planning areas and the NERC coordination. We can see that these regions here are designated by generally territory. As I zoom in a little bit further, we can see other regions appear here as well. So Chicago territory, and then there are some other territories down here, for example, Atlanta. And then as we move further west, we can see other territories as well. Now let's talk about energy communities. So energy communities are areas where the Inflation Reduction Act has designated territories that might qualify for energy development credits. And so these are areas where the fossil fuel employment communities exist, or potentially coal closure energy communities exist as well. So we can turn these on to take a look at, for example, fossil fuel employment energy communities. Again, areas that meet the threshold for fossil fuel employment and unemployment rate requirement. So as I zoom into a particular area, we'll be able to take a look at, for example, the West Central Illinois non-metropolitan statistical area. This one meets both the fossil fuel employment threshold and the unemployment rate requirement as well. In a similar vein, so instead of talking about fossil fuel employment, now we can take a look at coal closure. These are areas where a coal mine was closed after 1999, or a coal-fired electric generating unit was retired after 2009. Um, Interestingly, this particular data set has centralized areas where the units were closed, the coal energy generation units were closed. Those are demarcated in orange on the map, and then we will also have the adjacent regions as well, which are shown as yellow on the map. So these are qualifying for the credit because they directly adjoin a census tract with a qualifying coal closure. So as you take a look at some of the other regions on the map, you can see that generally it is orange region surrounded by several yellow regions as well for the coal closure energy communities. Next, let's take a look at power generation. This is speaking more towards what kind of projects and infrastructure are available that generate power. And so in most cases, we're talking about one of three combinations. We can talk about power plants themselves, which have their own specifics within them. We can talk about solar farms, and then we can talk about wind turbines. And so there's quite a few on the map here. Let's go down them one by one. We'll start with our power plants. And so the power plants available on AcreValue run the gamut basically from either coal and other fossil fuel down to renewables like hydro, so water powered, as well as wind and solar. We also will have battery storage facilities marked on here. And so as you find these types of facilities that you're interested on the map, you can select them as well and then see more information about that particular plant. So for example, I found a solar power plant. It looks like it is still ready for construction, but it looks like it is waiting for regulatory approval for the new construction. And interestingly, there's quite a few other power plants in the area here. You can click on them to see a little bit more. Here's an operating power plant. This looks like a hydroelectric power generation plant. It is operating, it's in service, producing electricity. And so for these types of power plants, we can see exactly how much electricity is being generated as well. Let's talk about a particular type of power plant, and this is specific to solar. And so for our solar farms, we have records on whether a farm is already operating currently or whether it is pre-operations or potentially retired and post-operation. So we can see a few examples of each on the map here. We do have a operating solar farm here. This looks like it's called Grand Ridge Solar Farm. And we can see that it started in 2012 and it generates 20 megawatts of power. The owner and operator is Invenergy. Similarly, we can see that there is a planned solar farm, or there are a few planned solar farms on the map here for later on. We can take a look at some of these. Note that the planned solar farms, their icons are slightly different than the operational solar farms. The ones that are operational have the center as white, and then the planned ones are yellow. So that's another way to tell the difference between operational solar farms and then ones that are still in construction or just announced and ready for approval. This particular one that we've selected, this planned one, looks like it is in pre-construction. It's scheduled to start later in 2024. Let's take a look at now going from solar renewables over to wind. So this will represent data set of all of the different wind turbines that are available on AcreValue as well. So things like, as you find the wind turbines on the map, you'll be able to see Is it part of a project? What is the project name? When did it start, or when was it constructed, and when has it actually started to produce power? Speaking of power, how much power is it generating as part of the project? And you can see a lot of different metrics for the turbine itself as well. Things like what model of turbine is it, how large is it, etc. And so as you zoom out, you start to get a really good sense of where these different wind projects are in the areas that you're taking a look at. So you can see groupings of wind turbines in particular areas. Generally, those represent either one or more wind projects in a particular area. Next, let's talk about our remediation sites. So these are locations that are either generally going to be demarking brownfield superfunds. So these are areas where there's been some sort of either environmental hazard designated, or potentially in the case of a brownfield, it's some sort of salvage or other open dumping facility. And so these will be demarcated on the map as well. You can see that the different icons are available for brownfields, for superfunds. You can click into each of them as well to see each of these facilities will have a registry ID. They're registered in the government databases, and so you'll be able to take a look at exactly which facility it is and then cross-reference that between other data sets that use this registry ID for these locations. And then to round off our premium and enterprise data access, we do also have the California water districts and parcel landowner labels. So let's take a look at California here to take a look at the water districts. And so as I turn on our water districts here, you'll be able to see the districts themselves are in purple, and you'll be able to see if they overlap, you'll see more than one district here represented. The districts themselves tell you which agency, which regional agency is controlling the water in those areas, and ultimately how many acres does that district encompass in terms of its water control. This is generally really helpful for other farmers and folks who are interested in developing in California and need access to water. And speaking of development, let's take a look at the final premium data set that's here. So parcel landowner labels. What this does is it allows you to take a look at the landowners themselves on the map directly. And so when you're doing research on searching for properties, we will be able to quickly see who is the landowner for a particular area, and then understand as well, are they a property of interest for me? And how can I then get in touch with them? Who are they? You can do that by then selecting a property that is interesting to you. And we'll get into some other use cases here of then speeding up that market research and outbound marketing process, like we talked about in the outline here, once we go through the different data sets. So let's move on to our plus data here. So this is available to subscribers of the consumer level plus and premium subscriptions, as well as the enterprise folks. We'll start off with crop cover. And so this is a really interesting data set. This is a government data set that tells us what land uses were for a particular property or region. And so as I turn this on, we can start to see the different crops and other land uses that have been available for any particular property. I can zoom in a little bit further and take a look at, for these particular properties, this past 2023, past year, for example, what was grown on it, so I can scan a CDL color. I can even click on the map here as well to not only understand, more information about this property, but I can also then see, what was actually grown here or what was the land used here. And so I would highly recommend when you open up this crop cover layer, click on the individual parcels themselves to see what land uses there were on that property, right? So soybeans this year, the property to the left of it looks like it was corn this past year, so that's quite interesting. And a very interesting observation for a lot of the Midwest is that as you flip between year to year, you'll notice that the crops that are being grown on properties change. This is due to a more and more kind of prominent uh, operation methodology called crop rotation. And so this allows you to grow different crops year by year so that the ground is continuously replenished with nutrients, for example. And so as I flip from 2021 to 2022 to 2023, we'll be able to see, 2021, it looks like this property here, the one that we started with was soybeans. As I move to 2022, it is now corn, designated by that yellow. And then as I flip to 2023, now it's once again soybeans. And so you can see that this is actually quite common for most of the Midwest as well, where there is row crop growth. Let me zoom out here a little bit, and then we'll be able to see most of it flips between corn and soybeans. In certain areas like California, this is a fantastic way to take a look at who's growing what on their properties. California is one of those states where there is a wide variety of different crops available. And so you can see things like tree crops, that could include your almonds, your pistachios, citrus as well, all the way down into things like tomatoes, alfalfa, other specialty crops, and grass as well. So definitely take a look at this in your area. Next, we'll move on to oil infrastructure. So this is taking a look at what kinds of pipelines and oil wells are available or existing in a particular area. So we can see the icons on the map and then select them as well to learn a little bit more about them. So here we have an oil pipeline. We do know the name of the pipeline and we'll be able to map out exactly where it passes through. And then you can see the oil wells themselves here on the screen. In a lot of cases, we'll be able to know the type and status. So whether it's operational or whether it's like this abandoned. And then if it is still running, we'll be able to tell you the drill date as well. Let's move into our production facilities. So these are facilities that are producing producing power from things like soybean, ethanol, biodiesel, and producing these materials here. So as I zoom out further, let's see here, perfect. So here we have a plant that is producing biodiesel. The site name is Seneca and is producing a capacity of 76 million gallons per year. We do also have an ethanol plant over here. And so these are plants that are going to be producing this liquid, depending on which type of plant that you select, right? So whether that's ethanol or biodiesel or soybean. As I zoom out, I should be able to see a few more plants appear as well. Let's take a look at our protected areas on AcreValue. So these correspond to either national, regional, or local lands that have been designated as things like national parks, maybe protected waters, or in some cases there are easements as well that are recorded. So we can see that as I zoom in towards the surface here, we'll be able to see this is a state park, it looks like, and we can see how many acres the state park encompasses, as well as where exactly on the map it is. We can also see who the manager of the state park is as well. And so if I need to plan for what properties I'm going to be potentially buying or selling, or maybe I'm an operator, what are the boundaries of the areas that I can operate into? And for people who are interested in easements, we will also have conservation easements available here as well. Here's an example of one, so we can see it on the map and then select it to understand a little bit more about who is the operator of the easement, the manager, what is the easement's name itself, and then critically, how many acres is it, where is it located on the map, and then what kind of status is it? So is it accessible, and then also what is it being used for? What is it managed for? As I zoom out a little bit, we'll also be able to see some protected waters and other water bodies. So let's flip over to those. So let's take a look at the water bodies that are here. And I can see here as well, as I highlight the water bodies, we can see that the different lakes, streams, rivers, etc., those are going to be shown here on the map. This allows you to take a better look at, where exactly do we have water passing through our particular areas, and maybe are there waterways that are not so obvious on the map using satellite view, but when using the water bodies data set themselves, we can see maybe there's a lake or a pond in the backyard, something like that. So you can see even for some of these smaller areas, oftentimes there will be lakes and ponds marked off here as well, just little small icons here, where it would have been really hard to find that on the map, but in our case you can. Let's next take a look at our building footprints. So this is our newest data set here, and this is essentially telling us where on the map can we see buildings at. And so this is a visual data set, and you can see as I turn on the building's footprints, you're able to see exactly where the buildings are located. You can see that in this town here, it looks like town of Granville. There's a higher concentration of buildings here in this urban area. And then as we take a look at some of these more rural properties and farmland, you can see that the buildings are a little bit more sparse. They usually tend to be concentrated around either farmhouses or potentially you have other buildings like this where it's a shed and maybe a couple of silos and other buildings like that that are specific to the farm itself. So another fantastic data set, and we'll cover some of the building footprint's main uses in a moment after we get through the different filters that are available, or the map layers that are available. We do also have organic farms on AcreValue. So this is telling you where are organic farms registered within the United States. And so that's a registry that comes from USDA. And you can see for any particular region, once you turn on the data set, who is the operator of this organic farm? How do I get in touch with them? And then are they certified? What crops are they certified to produce for their organic farm? Is it, potentially row crops and grain? Is it grass? Is it something else? Maybe livestock that they're producing. And so you get a sense of what actual organic farms are producing. Where are they producing them? For our more recreational oriented folks, so hikers, runners, bikers as well, we'll also be able to tell you trail access. So where are things like hiking trails in a particular area? Where can I go for a little bit of recreation, right? And so as I zoom into, let's say like right here, once we load in the trail data set on our map, we'll be able to see where these trails are located. And we can actually click on each of the trails as well to then see what the name of the trail is and then who maintains it. Oftentimes it'll be either a federal group like the U.S. Forest Service, maybe a regional or a state government, or potentially a local municipality as well that's going to be managing it. This is fantastic for your folks who are looking to figure out where I'm going to go hiking and then understand who the property owners are if I need to get permission for such. And the last data set that we have here in our plus data is the USGS geologic areas. So this is for all of our rockhounds out there who are interested in the areas and types of geologies that are within and underfoot. You'll be able to see kind of at a macro level, like where are the different types of geologic territories and areas that are here, what rock types can you find from them, and what age are they coming from as well. So you can see different examples here. As I move through the map, you can see that this area is from the Middle Devonian age, sedimentary rocks, and there's an abbreviation for each area as well. This is fantastic for if you're looking for a particular type of rock or you're just curious about maybe finding a rock in an area and you want to know potentially the time frame that it's from. This is a fantastic use for it. And speaking of uses, let's talk about some of the main ways that these filters are combined. And then we can also loop in some of the different ways that the filters are used with other AcreValue tools by our power users. So the first example that we can think of here is for development, and in particular electrical power generation. It's become a much more popular topic recently, especially with the Inflation Reduction Act and a lot of renewables development kind of booming in a lot of places. If you're a developer coming to AcreValue, how would you go about figuring out where to develop your property? Well, AcreValue has you covered on that. First of all, let's take a look at the actual electrical grid, right? Let's start off with where are structures for substations and taps that I can take my power to once I've generated it. Same goes for transmission lines. As long as I'm close by to a transmission or distribution line, then I'll be okay, and that'll reduce my cost of extra infrastructure to be built. Next, I can also turn on regions if I wanted to see who the major operator is in that area. That allows me to make sure that I am staying within a particular region here. So for example, PJM, I want to stay within that interconnection region. Let's stay there. And critically here, one of the newest updates that we've added is the energy communities again. So being able to say, I know that the Inflation Reduction Act provides tax credits for some of these other areas and programs. Let's take a look at developments within, for example, a coal closure energy community. I can toggle on that data set there and then try and find properties that are within the coal closure energy communities. These are the ones that are going to be qualified for your different credits as well. And looping this into some of the other data sets that are here, let's also talk about solar farms, especially if you're a solar developer. One thing I've heard from a lot of our developers is there are some restrictions, or there's a cap on how much solar you can put through a particular line or substation. And so if you are wanting to make sure that you're not going to be competing with anybody else in a particular queue, let's turn on our solar farms data set as well to make sure that we're staying away from any other planned solar farms that might be reducing the amount of power that a particular line or particular substation can accommodate. And finally, after we have turned on all of our relevant data sets here, maybe I start targeting some of the properties in these areas. What I can then do is I can start to incorporate some of the other data sets from AcreValue and some of the other filter tools as well. So let me show you an example of that. Right now, we're taking a look at what looks to be LaSalle County. And so what I can do here then is filter for properties in the particular county that fit a certain criteria. And that criteria might be as simple as, it's got to be within 2 miles from a substation. Maybe you're a type of person that wants to get quite sophisticated with your searches. And so you can then say not just distance to a substation, but perhaps I want to find properties that are maybe a certain acreage, right? So it's got to be between 20 and 60 acres, perhaps. It has to be within maybe 2 miles from your substation. And there are other filters that you can do here as well. For example, in Illinois, making sure that the PI of the land is not too high to make sure that you're following the recommendation to develop on lower productivity farmland so that the higher productivity farmland is saved for agricultural use. Let's go ahead and apply some of these filters and we'll take a look at the results that come back. And what we'll end up finding is that we can see exactly which properties are the right acreage criteria, are the right distance from a substation, and then critically, we can also see which properties will fit within the qualification territories for things like the Inflation Reduction Act tax credits. And so the properties that are within this yellow area, those would be the ones that I would certainly want to highlight for a particular search. Then I can start to include things like the parcel landowner names to see exactly who the landowners are for these types of properties. I can select one property in particular if I'd like to, but my recommendation at this point would maybe even look something like this to say, I have all of the properties that are within 2 miles from my substation. They're the right acreage. They're within my development area. Let's take a look at the list view here. And the list view is going to allow me to see exactly who the landowners of the property are, but it'll also tell me how to get in touch with them via direct mailer as well. And so these are the properties that are going to show up on my list. It's a one-to-one match with the properties that are on my map here. And if I wanted to know how to get in touch with some of these landowners, I would simply find their property or their name on my list here, which I can sort. And that will allow me to then get in touch with them either via a postcard mailer here, or if you'd like to, you can find digital contact information. So phone numbers, email addresses, and age, other alternative mailing addresses by selecting this blue magnifying glass here. This is for our skip tracing tool. Buy some credits in order to check out the skip tracing tool there. Another pretty prominent use case here is for the folks who are interested in using AcreValue for recreation. Maybe you're planning a trip. If you're somebody who is into, potentially hiking or other recreational land uses, maybe you're a hunter. How would you go ahead and find properties that fit all of the different criteria that you want for your land search? So let's take a look at turning on the recreational trails here to see, what properties have a trail nearby. We were just taking a look at a trail closer to the Chicagoland area. So let's use this as our example. And then we can also start to see, are there any, for example, national parks that are nearby within the protected areas designation? So we can take a look at national, regional, and local fee lands. Those will be your national parks and other recreational territories. And we can see that the trail falls within a park territory. It looks like it's a national forest. But if we wanted to find a property that was close enough to the trail, but also had access to maybe a regional or local park, we could do so from this conservation areas mapping as well here. And then once you find a territory or a property that is fitting those criteria, again, we'll leave the parcel landowner labels on. And then as you get closer and closer to the surface, you'll start to see that the landowners and their information start to pop up on the map here as well. Once you find a property you're curious about, you can certainly click their property to learn more about how to get in touch with them, as well as more information about the property specifically as well. And one last primary use case for a lot of folks is to find maybe properties that potentially don't have or have structures on them. So let's cover that very quickly. And this is fantastic too, because it's going to incorporate our building footprints data set, which let's turn on here. So we can see that there are quite a lot of buildings here. And what we can also see as well is the landowner labels. When you are searching for properties, if you wanted to search by whether the property has buildings or whether it's vacant land potentially for farmers and just using it for farms, you can then search by Illinois. Let's make sure that we're searching in all of Illinois here. And this particular property is in Will County, so let's search in Will County. And so once we find all of these properties in Will County, if you have any other search criteria, you're able to plug them in through the more filters option. Again, so maybe I want to find properties that are a certain soil productivity level for growing crops, maybe like 130, for example. Potentially, I'm searching for out-of-state landowners to make sure that I'm trying to find folks who are owners of the property, but registered on their taxes as living out of state. And then perhaps I'm also searching for properties that were primarily cropland. So I can say something like at least 70% of the field has been cropland recently. And once I apply my filters, what we'll end up seeing is, maybe a good chunk of properties will drop off. But if my search criteria is also that, it needs to be a property that has no buildings, then I can verify that using our buildings footprints data set. For example, if I'm trying to find vacant land in order to either buy it, appraise it, whatever it may be, we can see that this particular property's got buildings, so it's not going to fit. Out of all of my properties in the county here that do fit, let's take a look at where they are. Perfect. So there are a handful here that were mostly cropland recently, and also have out-of-state landowners. Are there buildings in these areas? We can see for some of the properties, it looks like there may be some buildings in the area, but for the most part, it is vacant land, which is fantastic. We wanted to see that as part of our search. If we wanted to double verify that too, we can actually go into a new setup for our property map as well, which is to go 3D, and then you can use your right click for the mouse button to then right click and hold and shift the angle of your map search to be a little bit flatter. Maybe you can see a little bit more of the elevation and contours of a property area, or you can shift it in different directions, right? So if I wanted to see a property from the north, it'll be defaulted to that. But if I wanted to see a property and kind of analyze it from other angles, I certainly could do that. And so definitely take a look at the 3D map option here to do a little bit more customizable land research when it comes time to taking a look at specific properties. Now, we've covered the different map layers that are available on AcreValue. We've covered a few examples of more of the primary ones that you'll be using for your particular searches and use cases. The final question here is, how do I get started? And so let's flip back to our slides to then talk about if you are curious about basic information and tools, as well as just getting access to some of the plus and premium data sets, you can purchase a subscription at acrevalue.com. We have a few short-term options there for you to be able to explore, get a sense of the system. If you're looking for more of the power user tools and commercial access, and you're looking for things like premium data sets that were in that higher category, feel free to take a look at the website for a short-term subscription, or what I recommend is get in touch with AcreValue sales team for a custom quote. The enterprise subscription is a little bit more customizable and flexible for your needs. And so certainly let us know, especially if you've got many states that you need to research, or you have other users on the subscription who you'd need to include. Let us know, and we can learn a little bit more about your use case and then put together a example quote for you that should fit your needs. Okay, so let's take a look at Q&A. Perfect. Okay. So let's take a look at questions that have been shared. How do I request additional map layers be added? So the best way to request additional map layers be added, get in touch with our AcreValue sales team or support team and let them know that you are looking for a particular type of map layer that you're interested in. Alternatively, if you want to purchase a subscription and see if we already have it, that's another great way to get started. Otherwise, emailing AcreValue support is probably the best bet there. AcreValue support is support@acrevalue.com. Where can I find info on the data sets? Another great question here. So for the data sets themselves, pretty much all of them will have some level of a tooltip here. So when you're opening up the map layer and you have the map layers available to you, you'll be able to see different different information about those particular data sets in the tooltips here. For some tooltips, they will also have additional click to learn more designations on them. So we have other resources on our AcreValue resource page that tell you more about the different map layers available to you. You can either get to those resources by selecting the datasets icon here. So like I have now, we'll be focused on the little tooltip. Click once and it'll open a resource page in another menu here, which you can then use to understand more information about that particular map layer. You can also get to that by using the search bar here at the top, go to more, and then we do have a resources section here with our feature insights. Those are more information about the actual map layers and some of the other tools that are on AcreValue. We do also have a corporate blog that not only covers some of these features, but also will tell you when new features are coming out as well. So take a look at those feature insights as well. And finally, can you tell how difficult the trails are? That's a great question. So let's flip back over to the map here. We'll take a look at our trails data set. Let's turn off our landowner names. Then here our example is in California. There are lots of trails out here. And so as a start, you can see a little bit of information about the difficulty just based on the length of the trail. What I would recommend in this case, then, if you're going to assess, maybe the difficulty of a trail here, take a look at the 3D map option. This will allow you to then get a sense of the contours of the properties in that area. And so as I then zoom into a particular trail, I can try and align the map to be a little bit more horizontal, and I can see that in this particular area. This is a trail that's got a lot of incline and elevation gain to it as well. So this may be a long one, and it's not quite particularly flat. You're able to see this using the 3D map tool to compare this trail to maybe something that's a little bit flatter down here in the valley region here. So take a look at the 3D tool. That'll definitely give you a good sense of, am I going to be walking through an area that's got lots of hills on it, lots of mountains, or is it going to be rather flat? And that'll conclude our webinar here. Again, thank you for joining the webinar with us today. For any other questions or folks who are interested in learning more about an enterprise subscription, feel free to get in touch with myself. My name is Jeff, and this has been the AcreValue presentation on how to use map layers. Thanks again for joining us.